Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Crew Inland Empire Coffee Break. I'm NoRhett Walls, Chapter President, and today we are talking with Link Logistics Real Estate, our Platinum Corporate Partner with Crew Inland Empire for 2021. And we're really happy to have Rachel Hickenbottom and Bud Pharris with us today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then we're going to get started. So Rachel is a wonderful lady. If you guys haven't met her and you don't know her in the chapter, please reach out and grab a coffee or something with Rachel. She is an incredible lady to get to know. So she joined Link Logistics Real Estate as Vice President of Development for the Western region in October of 2020, right during COVID. Rachel, okay, way to go. Prior to Link, Rachel worked for a brief time at CRG, a division of Clayco Company, after leaving Prologis in early 2020. Rachel joined Prologis in August 2018 upon the DCT Industrial Trust acquisition as a director of construction and development, focused on new development and construction projects in Southern California. Rachel spent 7 years at DCT Industrial in many roles, including leasing, construction, and development for both Northern and Southern California markets, as well as some projects in Washington. Rachel has over 25 years of commercial real estate industry experience. Prior to joining DCT in 2011, she worked for Prism Real Estate Corporation, Majestic Realty Company, and Panettone Development Corporation, each for 5 years. And she held various positions throughout those companies, including accounting, property management, leasing, legal documentation, construction, entitlement, and development. Rachel received her MBA and Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration with a concentration in accounting from California State University, Fullerton, and she holds a California real estate salesperson's license. So thank you for joining us today, Rachel. Quite the accolades. So Bud Pharris is also with us today, and he is the Senior Managing Director for the Western region for Link Logistics. So as a Senior Managing Director and Head of Development for the Western region, Bud has over 25 years commercial real estate experience and focuses primarily on industrial ground-up development, value-add projects, and leasing. During his career, Bud has sourced nearly $1 billion in capital deployment and development deals with an additional $700 million in regional transaction oversight throughout the West. Previously, Bud held roles including Senior Vice President, Partner, with oversight for the Western region for CRG Real Estate and Managing Director of the Western region for DCT Industrial Trust, but also served as an executive team member at DCT prior to its merger with Prologis in 2018. Prior to joining DCT, Bud served as a Senior Development Manager at Panettone Development. Across these roles, Bud has held responsibilities for development, capital deployment, portfolio management, and operations. Bud received a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from California State University, Sacramento. He is a member of the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties and the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties Industrial Development Forum, Part 7, Society of Industrial Office Realtors, SAOR. He serves as the Men's Committee Chair for the National Charity Group Child Health. So welcome, Bud and Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we're just going to jump right in and get started. We had a whole list of questions to go over, and Bud overachieved us and put a PowerPoint presentation together today to answer all those questions for us. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know if you guys noticed that Rachel and I had a similar career path for the last 20 years, and we're not married, although sometimes it feels like it, Rachel. No, but Rachel and I have known each other for almost 20 years now. We've sort of worked together and followed each other and along our path. So it's been great. And I, Rachel and I have a kinship that I think is, spans across many companies. So it's you can't replace that history.
Nope.
Anyway, if it's okay, what I thought I would do is, NoRhett and I had and Rachel went over some questions, a couple weeks back, and I thought it would just be maybe helpful to walk us through the questions and answers in the form of kind of how Link thinks about things. So hopefully you guys can all see this. Can everyone see the blue screen? Okay, cool. So real quick, in working with the Blackstone platform, Link Logistics Real Estate is the industrial platform for Blackstone. It's kind of funny. Blackstone left the industrial market in 2015 with the sale of Incor and GLP of $8 billion. And then they went, maybe that wasn't such a great idea. Let's get back into the industrial market. We think this market is really going somewhere. And so they re-entered the industrial market in 2016 by acquiring two smaller, I know it seems kind of funny to say that, 250 million and a 1.5 billion in Fladler and LBA respectively, but kind of got back in and they said, okay, let's build a best-in-class industrial platform moving forward. So in 2017, Blackstone acquired Gateway Industrial Properties, and that's what was formed, on kind of a go-forward basis in looking at our industrial portfolio. Blackstone, also acquired a capital deployment company in Talos Capital in 2017, and then in 2018, the rubber really hit the road when they acquired Gramercy Property Trust for $7.6 billion, and then additional acquisitions of the Cabot portfolio of $1.8 billion and MBH for almost $1 billion. So now that in 2018 got some real capital, some real size, and some scale, and they said, hey, this is a $10 billion company. What would the possibility be of doubling this in the next year? Well, that's exactly what happened. Actually, it almost quadrupled with the acquisition of Space Center, GLP for almost $19 billion, and Colony for almost $6 billion. And then at that time, the Blackstone platform said, hey, let's change our name and let's be real about this. They consolidated everything together, called it Link Industrial Properties, and off into 2020 we went. And then in 2020, we had a little bit of a identification problem. We were three different companies and three different logos. So we finally came out with what I think is the coolest of the names and logos, because I think Link Logistics Real Estate really states who we are. And then, by the way, down here in the corner, we've got a pretty cool corporate brand now, I think. I hope you guys feel the same. But so that's kind of who we are today. We're basically a $45 billion company going into 2021. So, which, by the way, let's see here. So Link Logistics has 571 employees presently, 300 of which have been hired within the last 12 months. And there's a little bit of a history behind that. I'll get to it in just a sec. But 53% of our employees are female, and 52% of that 53% have management positions. So we're proud of that. And I have a couple points I could speak to in a bit, but I think that also comes up on some of the questions that NoRhett had provided. And then in kind of just talking about who we are today, kind of where we see ourselves, I talked about being about a $45 billion company, but that's well over 400 million square feet, 9,000 customers and or tenants in over 3,000 properties, which to me was just mind-boggling. The West region that I ran for DCT was about a seventh of the size of the West region that I oversee now. Actually, Bianca, I'm just for some reason your video just popped in. So Bianca's been along the path with Rachel and I for, I think, on and off. We were separated for a little while, but we worked together for probably, what do you think, Bianca, like 10 plus years at least, right? You're on mute.
Yeah, so we've worked together, I think, like on and off for at least 10 years, but we've known each other since
our San Antonio days.
19 years.
Yeah, oh God.
We go way back.
That's crazy. Anyway, so frankly, when you work with people that are good, you find a way that are good, that you like and and you trust. So I honestly, I don't think it's any great mystery why Bianca, Rachel, and I are all at the same company again. I think we all work really well together and try to bring in the best possible folks we can. So, okay, so that's kind of that. We're the second largest industrial owner in the U.S. You guys probably can guess who the first largest owner is. Prologis, Rachel's former employer. Okay, so so if you look at kind of like our tenant mix on the industrial platform is fairly well mixed, but here is a list of our top 20 tenants, and it's funny because they only make up about 15% of our total tenant mix, and annual base rent. So, obviously most of the biggest companies out there have Amazon as their number one tenant. It's not a big mystery, but and that 4 to 5% of the total value of the portfolio is pretty standard. I think most companies, maybe things would change a little bit, but most companies want to try to stick to that, no more than 5% with any one given tenant. But those are all people I'm sure you've seen, I'm sure you buy things from. There's third-party logistics, and so much of this is consumer goods and food and a little manufacturing, a little construction, but for the most part, the bulk of our business is really about logistics and goods movement. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of our business and our platform. We have, like I said, 571 employees. We're in 20 offices across the US. You can see them fairly well concentrated there. We have some new offices coming, but we can talk about that in a little bit. But our in-house capabilities are listed there at the bottom. Asset management, acquisitions, development, construction, leasing, property management, and marketing. I do have oversight of I think almost all of those categories there, and so it's a big job. It's a fun job, and I will tell you, I feel super fortunate to work with literally the best and the brightest in the business, and I've been doing this for 25 years. So I feel really fortunate to have the team that we have. We have experienced employees with deep local relationships, and I think that comes again with just the time. We have national scale, and that's coupled with our local vendor relationships. Again, kind of talking about the decentralization is super helpful. I think very necessary to be effective in this environment. We do have extensive in-house capabilities, as kind of mentioned, with those 7 bullets there at the bottom of the map. And then, frankly, this is one thing that I noticed, and one of the reasons why I wanted to join Link is that there's good, healthy relationships with our customers, with employees and communities. I originally got introduced to Link as a developer, with Link as our capital partner. So it was kind of an interesting foray in. They asked me if I'd be interested in joining the team, and I said, heck yeah. So, and then the rest is kind of history. The way we do our business, though, I would say about 80% of our business, and maybe even more, I try to just apply the iceberg principle, but about 80% of our business comes from the brokerage community and that sourcing, and frankly, even mass marketed properties. 20% of that comes from our own sourcing with relationships and maybe one-off deals or off-market deals. And so, but I would say 99% of our deals exist through our broker relationships. I don't know if that makes sense. Some stuff is marketed and some stuff we source through our broker relationship, but for the most part, it really is about the brokerage world. So they're our friends. We like them. We have good. We try to always have good relationships. I know nothing's perfect, but we really try to do the right thing all the time, and that's really important to me. Is our reputation in the marketplace and making sure that we're seen as the most upstanding, honest, and forthright group there is out there. And we pay commissions quick too, so I always like that. I think that's important. So here's our investment strategy. When I think about like where we invest or how we invest, and again, kind of just thinking about the central region, the west region, the central and east regions act very similarly, but there's some nuances to each market. So I'll just talk about the west. But we typically look to invest in infill locations. Infill in my mind could even be Ontario and Rancho Cucamonga, Fontana, and that. But really true traditional infill is like Los Angeles, Commerce, Carson, things along that line. So anything kind of related to logistics users, and then near population centers, and obviously the ports of Long Beach and LA are one or two very important factors to our business. And so we can talk more about that too at a later point here, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that one. So if we talk about, you guys have all heard last mile. And so as we talk about last mile portfolio benefits and really trying to hone in on that infill strategy, it's really kind of about shortened delivery times. I remember when I first started ordering stuff online, you guys probably feel the same way. It's like, yeah, if I got it within a week, 5 days, that was pretty cool. Now, if you go online, for some goods, I mean, I'm okay with a day or two, but there are certain things like if I don't get it tomorrow morning, I'm going to be sort of annoyed. And so this is what's really changed in our business. And so I just wanted to put a couple of schematics up here for you. So Amazon's average facility size has changed from an average of 588,000 square feet in the late 90s to an average size of about 125,000 square feet in today. And there's some nuances behind that. We can certainly talk, and maybe we will go into some questions. But and then the Amazon, their new proximity to the consumer base, as we look at hundreds of thousands of population, you can see there where they've really gotten closer and closer to the customer and the rooftops. So there's a couple more slides here related to this. So we talk about accelerating the supply chain reconfiguration is what's happening in the distribution world. And so we sliced up the pie, but I don't know if anyone has heard this or not, but as you think about it from a landlord standpoint or a brokerage standpoint, there's about 4% of the total expenses of an organization that are dedicated towards rent, which is kind of funny because you negotiate so hard on these deals up front, but it's to think that there's 96% more that they're paying attention to that affects their bottom line. It kind of gives you a little perspective. So I think every dollar matters to our customers. It obviously matters to us too, but it's kind of funny if you think about transportation cost versus rent. It's a 12-to-1 ratio, which I feel like that's gotten higher over time, but it's significant, it's real, and it's something that we see in every deal we do, whether it's a lease, a development deal, or an acquisition of existing investment. Okay, so development obviously is something that we do. Rachel and I have that heavily in our background. So we talk about development and redevelopment of sites concentrated in infill coastal markets. It's redevelopment because the closer you get to the ports, the tougher it is to find, pristine dirt, right, or land to develop on. So in some instances, we'll buy a site and tear it down, or we'll buy an older building and pull it back and make it more functional. So our development pipeline will generate about $120 million worth of net operating income for us on a go-forward basis. And that's we've got about 6 million square feet expected to start construction in the West. Well, that's not exactly true. 6 million square feet of expected or continued construction, and construction starts in 2021. About 1 million square feet. It's actually just over 900,000 square feet in Southern California alone in 6 different projects. Rachel knows those near and dear to her heart. She's working on all of those. So Rachel's got a really big job on making sure our development stays on course. So here's our West region overview. And guys, I'm almost through this, so this will give us some time to chat about some of this. I thought maybe it'd be better to just go through it and then we can kind of open it up to questions. So our West region overview, for 2021 in the West region, we're anticipated to lease, and we're on target to lease about 17 million square feet in over 800 transactions, which is about, it's almost 2.5 transactions a day, which to me is just mind boggling. When I first came over and we were talking about those numbers, like, how do you keep it straight? But I'll tell you, we've got some great internal systems, and we've got some great people that do a really good job on managing all this. The other thing too is kind of, through acquisitions, we deployed almost $4 billion in the last 12 months in 12 transactions, totaling about 31 million square feet. Almost $4 billion just sounds like an insane amount of capital deployment. And I think it is. But I think we do a really good job of shepherding Blackstone's capital through a couple of different investment vehicles, but that's something we do. The other thing that we were a little light on in the last 12 months is the dispositions of some of our existing assets, and I think part of the reason is we're really trying to work through some of the older, less functional product, but we've done a good job of moving along through that. So, but we'll continue to move forward with our disposition plan that could be as much as $1 billion in the next 12 months. So there'll be opportunities there for, acquisitions and or dispositions through our brokerage teams. And then on the development side, I think I kind of already alluded to this, but 6 million square feet in 10 projects, which is 20 buildings in the West. Some of them are just finishing up. Some of them are getting ready to permit and move forward. And so that's kind of the overview. And then if you look at Southern California in particular, you can see our Inland Empire, Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego portfolio is almost 40 million square feet, about 400 tenants, and we're about 95% occupied, which is unprecedented. I can remember at the DCT days breaking 90% and just being so excited about that. It's a very difficult, this market is just insanely hot and tight from a leasing perspective. And so oddly enough, that our 1/3 of the US is about 1/3 of our Western portfolio at 34%. And then, so here's so this is always a question that people ask, and I try to be really thoughtful about this, like kind of what keeps me up at night. Just part of the fact that I just don't sleep very much. I don't know why, but one of the things that a couple different things that I do think about is kind of our jurisdictional challenges. And I said jurisdictional because it's not just cities, but it's agencies, and it's South Coast Air Quality Management District, which I know is a hot topic right now. I think growing tenant demand in a good way. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because it's really hard to find space for some of our growing tenant needs, and that's hard to not be able to provide space for somebody who needs it. And then we can talk a little bit about this piece too. I'm happy to dig in on the construction cost increases. I'm sure you guys have all heard about it. Not so much in concrete, but very much in wood and steel. And so again, happy to dive into that a little bit. And then the other thing that I worry about is a black swan event. And I'm not sure if everybody knows what a black swan event is. I didn't know it until one happened, which is a global financial crisis of 2008, 2009. We also just came out of one that was called COVID. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that was another black swan event. Like, who knew, right? So it's an outside force that has a negative impact on our business. And then the third thing I would say, and this is a question that came up, and at first I said, that's kind of old news, but the trade wars, and it's funny, I don't know if anyone saw, there was an article yesterday in the Wall Street Journal talking about the impact of the trade wars and the some of the tariffs that we put on China in 2018 and 2019. And maybe I'll just hit on that really quick, and then we can dive into the rest of the stuff. But on the Chinese imports, the Trump administration imposed those tariffs in 2018 and 2019. It was about a $370 billion negative impact to China, and the idea there was to kind of boost manufacturing in the U.S. and kind of onshoring. But what happened was a lot of the U.S. companies basically just reshored. So they went to Vietnam, Taiwan, and Malaysia for their telecommunications, furniture, and apparel needs, which, unintended consequence. But Vietnam went from number 12 from an import to the U.S. to number 6 from 2019 to 2020, so it's kind of like, again, in unintended consequences. I think it definitely put a lot of pressure on China, but many of the other Asian communities, countries benefited from that. So gang, that's the nuts and bolts. Oh, hey, wait, there's me. So this is a new caricature. I am a cyclist. I think everybody that works with me knows that. It's a little embarrassing, that little picture, but I figure what the heck, I'll throw it up there. And then I'm also heavily involved in Child Help, which is a charity that helps prevent child abuse and provides safe environments for kids that are abused in the U.S. And then also our company is involved with Core Giving, and it's another great charity that puts meals in front of millions of children that go through their days without Core Giving would go through their days without a real meal. I want to say it's almost 20% of children population don't have, 3 squares a day. So, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. Rachel, do you want to talk at all about kind of like, what do you think about like kind of your experience with Crew or NoRhett? Do you want to take the helm? How do you want to do that?
NoRhett can.
Completely yes. Go ahead, Rachel. That was going to be the question we were going to ask.
What's the question? Sorry. About my experience with Crew.
So
and
why you chose to get involved.
Why I chose to get involved is I just I think for me, I wanted to be more of a mentor and try to reach out to people. I think in my career, I've just been so busy and never had an opportunity to network as much as I wanted to. So when I was at Prologis, I thought it was really important to get involved with Crew. And one of the first things I did was that panel at Cal Poly Pomona, which I really loved, and talking to all the college students. And now that my kids are going off to college, I have twins going to college next year. It's like they need mentors and people need it. And I just feel like I want to start giving and teaching people more about my career and how I got through it. And in hindsight, I wish I was more involved in my younger career, and I don't know how I would have done that being a full-time mom and the craziness, like Bud said, that keeps you up at night. I've had many of those nights on construction jobs, development projects, things that aren't going right. But I feel like now in my life, I think I'm at a good point, and I just want to give back more and help people. And I think that every organization that I work for, from Prologis, Prologis was great. And they really encourage you to get involved in things and be able to do things like this and, support everybody and try to network. And I just think that's really important. And I think the mentorship is extremely important these days, especially for women as well.
I agree, Rachel, 100%. Absolutely. You have always been a wonderful cheerleader for Crew and helping your companies get involved with our chapter, and the way that you've supported us, we really appreciate that. So I want to share some fun facts about Bud and Rachel, because sometimes we forget about these. And while we're doing that, please put your questions in the chat box and we can go through them one by one. I know I have a few questions for them as well, so please definitely do that.
Would it be better to stop sharing?
I'm sorry, Bud, go ahead.
So would it be better to stop sharing?
It's up to you, completely up to you.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's.
So,
yeah, I'll stop sharing so everyone can kind of see each other a little better.
Perfect.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So let's tell some fun facts about Rachel first. And I have a couple of questions just so you know. So Rachel was a collegiate All-American bowler at Cal State Fullerton. So anybody that has a bowling team, Rachel is your new best friend. She has 2 identical twin boys. Like she said, they're heading to college in the fall. That's going to be fun and exciting for you. And she's been on TV several times for Bowling, 60 Minutes, and America's Funniest Home Videos. All for bowling, or what were they about? That's what I want to know. I want to know, what were you on 60 Minutes for?
So 60 Minutes, one of my twin boys has highly superior autobiographical memory. So he is like, if you've ever seen the 60 Minutes episodes with Mary Lou Henner from Taxi, if you guys, some of you may not be old enough for that, where she could remember every date and everything she did that date, and it's autobiographical. So my son, we discovered, had that because he used to come up with all of these dates out of the blue, like, Dad, you took me to that museum on July 17th, 2005 or something. And he just kept doing that. And so when the first episode of 60 Minutes ran, the professor is at UC Irvine. So my husband contacted him and said, I think my son has this. And he says, there's a lot of phone calls I've been getting since this episode. So they did some interviews with Tyler, and basically he has it, not to the extreme that some people have it, but he definitely remembers it. So we were interviewed by 60 Minutes one whole afternoon at, they barely put snippets on, but we were in the office and I was there on camera with my 2 sons. But the interesting thing is my other identical twin, he did not have it, but they never had the funding to be able to, he had an MRI done like a couple of years ago, because there was something that could be different in the brain that they've discovered, but one has it and one doesn't. So it's kind of interesting. And the BBC did a piece on them as well, since they were identical. So.
Hey Rachel, I don't know if I've ever asked you, like, is it Chad? Who has it?
Tyler.
Tyler has. Does Chad feel shortchanged and bummed out?
No, no. And Tyler doesn't like the attention. He didn't want to continue with any of the studies at UCI, and it just wasn't for him. And we said it was his choice. But yes, we were on 60 Minutes. Probably, I think it's been 7 years now.
If you guys haven't seen it, like I've watched it a couple times, it's really fascinating.
Yeah,
it really is.
Something really
kid,
rare.
The lead kid is like crazy. Like,
yeah, the lead kid has the spectrum way above my son, but he still remembers dates and things, but it's personal to him. He wouldn't remember other things. It doesn't help him in school, even though he's a good student. It's all autobiographical memory.
What is that? What is autobiographical?
Yourself, like if you'd write an autobiography, I guess. So they call it autobiographical memory. Highly superior autobiographical memory. So yeah.
I'm thankful that I can forget some of the
really
things.
Well, with that, we're going to move right on to Bud, who we now
goody.
know is an avid mountain biker. We love his new little design there of himself. That's really cool. I think you should put that on letterhead or a notepad or something. You have a really famous great uncle, and you also are the last of 3 boys, but you have 4 daughters. So let's start with your uncle.
Yeah, so it's funny, like it's Joe DiMaggio. And so it's kind of funny, like you grow up with it, you don't really think about it, but some people really react to that, especially people like on the East Coast are like, oh my God, Joe DiMaggio, that's amazing. Are you a baseball player? Nope. Are you a really good athlete? Not really. But it is a pretty cool thing. The Italian heritage runs deep, and it's amazing how many connections you can make when that topic comes up, but it's pretty cool. I have one of his old baseball gloves, and I have a baseball bat that he used in the 1941 All-Star game, which is probably worth $1 zillion, but he didn't sign it. So, it's like, well, how do we know that? So I'm like, I don't know, because he gave it to my mom, and my mom gave it to me, So anyway, kind of cool.
Interesting, really interesting. Well, so let's start with some questions. Can you do an overall cost comparison from a project you've been working on for construction costs from maybe 2019 to 2020? We were talking a little bit about that previously.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I think that came out in the notes a little jumbled. So let me see if I can just kind of clarify. I can't really even compare 2019 to 2020. I can compare 2020 to early 2021. And just like there was a couple examples I think, NoRhett, you and I chatted about, but we have a 135,000 square foot building that we're getting ready to break ground on in Rialto. And from October of 2020 to January of 2021, the overall construction costs, hard costs, increased by 10%. So if you annualize that, I mean, that's like a 30% increase in construction costs in a year. I don't know, we haven't actually seen that, but construction costs are being heavily affected by, supply and demand, shortage of materials, mostly around, I think I said this earlier, wood products and steel products, and even roofing material that, comes from China as well. But, oddly enough, so construction costs have gone up, land costs have gone up, but guess what else has also gone up at the same or even a greater rate is rental rates. And so as long as all 3 of those things are kind of headed in the same direction, at some point there's probably a pinch point, but I'll tell you the rent growth is keeping right up and maybe even exceeding some of these other costs. I think once one of those arrows heads in a different direction, we need to start thinking about it, especially if it's rents. Like if rents taper off or head downward and costs continue their upward trajectory, there's an issue. But I'll just say, like, there's another example. The other example I think we chatted about was a 685,000 square foot building in Pharris, California that is under construction. When they originally budgeted the roof, which is a metal wood hybrid roofing system, very standard out here. It's a 3-ply. It has 2% skylight coverage, and very standard roof construction. I mean, back in the day, 10 years ago, roofs would cost $3 or $4 a foot. In October, they cost $5.50. October of last year, it was $5.50 a foot. And in the repricing in January, this is not our project. It's a competitor's, but a friendly competitor. They had the roof repriced at $11.12 a foot, which is more than 100% increase in a 4-month time period. Now, that's kind of a perfect storm because it's steel, it's wood, and it's a hybrid roof system that is, kind of the OSB sheath through sawdust and glue and all that. So basically, it's a perfect storm because all three of those are the three highest priced materials right now. So, roofing.
But I would add that the lead time right now is we have to lock in these high prices and can't hope for them to come down because you won't get your roof for like 10 months. I'm sorry. Some of them are 40 weeks out. And so we're having to lock in a lot of the construction at these high prices that you wouldn't, they've, like you said, they've doubled and tripled on the roof, but then you're not going to get it. And you're already going to have to delay your project maybe if you're ordering it. Like we ordered something on a project for Orange County that we're working on with Panattoni, and it's not even gonna come till February, and it's May, but we had to put the order in and lock it in right now. So, and I've heard on my Seattle call for a project that HVAC is being delayed up there. Like the lead times is the other factor, which unfortunately that they're seeing right now. And that's the demand, I think, from the shutdown from COVID to the energy crisis in Texas. I've heard that PVC pipe is hard to get, certain things that come out of Texas that were locked down. So that's just another note that's happening right now in our world.
And Rachel, a normal roof is 16 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Like crazy. 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. It's 40 weeks right now. We saw on a bid recently from a sub.
Wow. So that links to a question that Robin typed into the chat here, and you kind of touched on it, Rachel, but so an insider input on when things will level off with the incredibly long wait times at the ports due to the COVID backup. So how has that affected your business? You talked about how it's affected your business. When do you guys think that will level off? Do we see any future of that?
Rachel, you want to take it?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I think that's the answer. We really don't have an idea. There's 2 major general contractors that I use for information. One is Fulmer Construction, the other is Oltman's Construction. Both have said that the cost increases will probably go through the summer, and likely or hopefully taper off in the fall. And that seems to be the consensus, but there's no real rhyme or reason. I'm sure there are people smarter than me making those calculations, but it would be nice to have it taper off a little bit. At some point, I think some projects will get put on hold at some point, but anyway. Do you want to
really interesting? So Lindsay has a couple of comments here for you also. Great. Go ahead. So Lindsay has read Steven Schweissman's bio, What It Takes, and he emphasizes the one significant differentiator of Blackstone and their affiliated companies is that they only hire 9s and 10s. So clearly she feels that they found that with Rachel and Bud. So kudos to you both. That's a nice compliment, Lindsay. And she has a question here. So, but a hot topic of conversation is the proposal that infill industrial logistics could be the savior of vacant retail big boxes in repositioning them as last mile distribution. It's interesting concept because the flip side of that is the argument that distribution demand driven by online retail was the death of those real retail big boxes.
Good point.
So hang on, she has more.
Yeah.
To what extent and are cities in Southern California open to the idea of allowing some of these vacant retail big box stores or facilities to be rezoned for last mile distribution?
There's a lot to unpack there. So I think doesn't the concept make a ton of sense, right? Mm-hmm. These malls are all going away. Let's put industrial uses in them. It makes total sense to me. Functionally, and from a construction standpoint, it's very hard to repurpose the floor plate and the construction of a traditional mall. There is, however, lots of parking stalls and lots of room to move trucks around and everything else. And on the flip side of that is right outside those parking stalls are streets and roads not necessarily made for truck traffic. And guess on the other side of that street is typically houses or apartments or retail. And so it's really not, the two don't really mesh. The other thing too that the cities have to get their arms around is the fact that the sales tax that these malls were providing, now the sales tax goes away. Oops, sorry about that, guys. Well, thing popped up there. Sales tax revenue goes away. And then there's the environmental piece, which is, kind of what the trucks with the diesel fuel and the congestion and the air quality and what they're doing to these kind of more infill markets that are, and when I say infill, I mean like inside residential hubs. And so those are all things that come into consideration. I will say Prologis just acquired a mall in Richmond, and their plan there is to redevelop that. And I believe that there's a residential component to it. And frankly, it's funny. I just talked to Kim Snyder, who's the president of the West region for Prologis last night, and he's like, hey, bud, they're so big, like they can do one-off deals like this and have them, maybe not be as successful as they had hoped. They did a multi-story industrial spec building in Seattle. They were the first ones to do it. They finished it. It was really expensive to build, and they basically leased it to Amazon as soon as they were finished. I mean, it's just like, so they can get a little more aggressive on some of those things. But I would just say that, and I also read a study, this is probably a couple of years ago, of all the malls in the U.S., there's about 40 that solve some of those issues, like a mall with good infrastructure right outside of it, maybe not right in a residential hub and maybe close to an interstate. So there's really not as many as you might think. And I think about some of the malls and stuff where I grew up, and a lot of those, in the Bay Area and in Sacramento area, a lot of those just are not well situated for, this trucking. And then as you think about last mile fulfillment, right? They've got the UPS trucks, those smaller trucks. They still need to get their product from somewhere. And typically that means a 53-footer coming in, maybe not as many, but then also the amount of traffic that comes from these bobtail trucks is, it's much more excessive than auto traffic. And so it's kind of really about traffic and the impacts to the environment and sales taxes and cities and on and on. So
I think it's going to be interesting to see if that happens more, like what Prologis did in Richmond. I mean, I see Kathy and Jennifer on, they're in development too, but every time you try to build something, it's all about, are you close to residential? What's the traffic? What's the impact of the roads? And obviously the sales tax with the malls are different, but it'll be interesting to see how this world turns in the next year and a half to 2 years, if that's where it actually turns and the cities are going to have to support it, because they may not have any big box sales tax anywhere. So they're going to have to figure out, I think they're going to pivot. It's going to be interesting, I think. But all the worries that cities have in normal developments are even going to be elevated because, like you said, in the retail, there's all that stuff's usually there, the rooftops, that they don't want big trucks in the neighborhoods, and the screening of everything. And so this kind of, it'll be interesting.
So I think, put it in perspective though. All right. So think about a retail center that had a Kmart in it that's now closed, right? So why couldn't that be a last mile distribution center? It already had big box truck delivering all of the merchandise to that facility. What's the difference if it's then going to be picked up by Amazon and delivered to my house, or if I'm physically going to that store to buy it there? I think the cities need to look at things a little bit differently because it's already there. It already has truck traffic delivering product to that facility. Maybe
I think cities
on the
are
same scale right up front. Right.
I think they're going to have to look at it.
Will.
Yeah, it's going to be up to the cities.
Definitely.
I would see local jurisdictions trying to figure out a way to get the sales tax on the product that moves through there, which isn't typical. I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is, I'm totally making the number up, but I'm sure it's like there's many more. It's not even a number. I think there's many more truck trips that come as a result of a last mile facility than a 53 footer or 2 or 3 bringing product into Kmart and dropping it off. I think of a couple of examples where we've had tenant issues because, an Amazon fulfillment center or maybe not necessarily a true last mile facility the way they're building them now, but it's causing problems with people in their cars, Uber drivers coming by to pick up product and take it out, trash, people gathering in the parking lots and, smoking and throwing their trash on the ground and, just making it fairly unsightly because there's a huge amount of traffic and not just cars, but trucks and people. And so that was one of the very first deals we did with Amazon was near the LAX airport. And we leased them a 200,000 square foot building. It was a cross dock, right? So you could load on one side and then ship out on the other side. And it was a nightmare. I don't know, Rachel, if you remember that.
I do. It was
Remember those Uber
all the
trucks?
drivers. Yeah, it was a mess there. Yeah. Too much. They didn't have enough parking. They had tons of, it was a mess in the parking lot all the time.
So maybe one other thing worth mentioning is I'd say a couple of years ago, Amazon came out with a prototype AMZL, which was a true last mile facility. It's about a 20% coverage. So they would be like 30 to 35 acres, which would typically yield a 700,000 square foot building. But in this case, it's anywhere from 100 to 150,000 feet, actually 100 to 200,000 feet. And again, tons of queuing for small trucks around the site, like 10 bays worth of transload area to go from the building to these trucks that then take off, and like 2,500 car parking stalls. So if you think about it, it's literally a building with a route in and a route out for trucks and then parking around the whole thing. And so we were involved, Rachel and I were involved at our last company on a deal in St. Louis, which led to a second deal, by the way. Rachel, I don't know if you heard that or not, but they're doing 2 AMZLs in St. Louis. And they've had a really hard time. Everyone's had a really hard time getting them approved and getting them through the process just because of the environmental impacts of these facilities. So there you go.
Really interesting. We're going to have a couple last questions here, and then we're going to wrap it up. So Joe has a question. She'd like to know, does Amazon typically do their own TIs or get a minimal allowance? Do they pay rent prior to occupancy?
Yes, and maybe. So I think what was the first question was, do they do their own TIs? Yes, they do. Do they get some tenant improvements up front? They typically do, and they're good credit risk, right? So landlords will say, hey, I had a $5 tenant improvement allowance on this building. Like, let's say it's a new building. I had $5. You guys can have that. You can have 10. We'll $10 per square foot. We'll amortize a little bit in, and then you guys can do your TIs. I will tell you, like, guys, they do $100 a foot in TIs in a lot of their facilities. It's just highly mechanized. There's robots. There's all not in every building. There's all different kinds of Amazon facilities. But the answer is yes, they do their own. They have a construction department that works oftentimes with folks like us. And oftentimes, I will say this, their process is arduous to get through and get to a point where they're paying rent. And so oftentimes you literally can be, they'll sign an agreement that says a reimbursement agreement that says, hey, we've got to go through our 22 levels of approval. But we can't wait that long. So we'll indemnify you and we'll pay you all the money you spend on this deal if for some reason it doesn't happen. And so a lot of times we'll give them, like, let's just say as an example, you give them like 4 months free rent, give them $10 in TIs, and there they are at the end of the 4th month, and they're not done with their TIs, and they say, hey, we're not paying you rent. We're not up and running for business. But I think that's kind of the problem of a few years ago. I think a lot of us have gotten much smarter on it and said, hey, regardless of anything that happens, you're paying rent on this day. And so you just have to know how to put together the lease document that protects you as a landlord. And frankly, it's not a fight. They get it and they understand. They want to work with their development and owner partners. So that's kind of sort of a long-winded answer. A lot of times they are paying rent even before they're done with their TIs.
Incredible. Very interesting. All right, so last question for you guys. The World Logistics Center, will Link be looking to be developing in that facility in Moreno Valley? And we have Melissa McLean here from the city of Moreno Valley today, so.
Oh, thank you
so
for
you
that
know.
heads up. Heck no, I mean, yes, of course. No. So gang, I mean, in all frankness, I love what Ito's done out there. I think it's amazing. I've been on a couple panels with him. He's a character. I have a lot of respect for
Yes,
what
he
he's done.
is.
He's had that vision. And he's a pretty funny guy. I'm excited for him. I think it's great. He got the settlement. You know, I guess that was a month ago. But that's not really our strategy. Our strategy is much more infill. And I said that earlier, like Rancho and Ontario and Fontana is kind of like those. There are some infill locations, but I think to go out there, you know, I know Beaumont and Banning have done some, you know, really come into their own in the last couple of years. That's just not our strategy right now. But I totally get it. As a developer and an owner, I'm really supportive, and I hope they're successful as long as they don't take any deals from us.
Really good answer. Great answer.
Rachel, did I miss anything?
So,
No.
Okay.
No.
so Rachel and Bud, we thank you so much for your time today and sharing everything about Link Logistics Real Estate. Thank you for being a partner with Crew Inland Empire. We greatly appreciate you both. And everybody have a wonderful week. Thanks for attending.
Oh, yeah, if anybody
Check out our website for our upcoming events.
Great. Hey, if anybody has any questions or needs, I think NoRhett, you asked like, who do we talk to? You can start with Rachel.
Absolutely.
But I'm also happy to help. Anyone can reach out. I don't know if my contact information is on there, but Rachel, oh, you have it all. But I'm happy to help. I'm a huge fan and supporter too. I love Rachel's passion. When we came over here, she goes, "Bud, you better let me do my crew thing over here too." And I said, "Absolutely, you bet." So anyway, thank you all very much. It's been fun. Love this stuff.
Thank you.
Great.
All
Thanks,
right, you guys
everyone.
have a terrific week, everybody. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.